Awaken your spirit, chosen ones. Never confuse gentleness with surrender. The quiet ones are usually quiet because they're calculating. They called you an earth angel because you didn't react when you could have, because you absorbed tension instead of exploding, because you chose restraint over chaos in rooms that rewarded noise. To them, your calm looked like softness, your patience looked like permission, and your silence looked like agreement. That label was never about who you were. It was about how comfortable you made other people feel while they crossed lines and called it misunderstanding. Here's a fact most people miss. In psychology, restraint requires more cognitive control than aggression. It takes more energy to hold back than to lash out. That means the person who stays composed isn't weaker. They're actively regulating power. That's why the moment you stop regulating it for everyone else, the room feels different. Tension rises. Faces change. People suddenly say you've changed, as if growth was supposed to ask for their approval first. This is where the myth breaks. Angels were never designed to be harmless decorations. They were messengers, guardians, enforcers of order. War was always part of the job description. Somewhere along the way, people rewrote the story to mean you should be endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly available. Basically, polite, glowing furniture. Smile, heal, repeat. Don't interrupt the comfort. And yes, there's a bit of dark comedy in realizing this. The same people who praised your calm now flinch at your clarity. The ones who said, "You're so understanding," suddenly struggle to understand you. Turns out they didn't like peace. They liked compliance with good lighting. This topic isn't about becoming cruel. It's about remembering that kindness without boundaries is not virtue. It's leakage. It's about the moment you realize that protecting your energy isn't a fall from grace, it's a return to alignment. They may have called you an earth angel, but they forgot something important. Angels don't exist to be used. They exist to restore balance, and balance, when overdue, is rarely gentle. Number 1. Being called an earth angel was never a compliment. It was a leash. That label sounded warm, spiritual, even flattering, but it quietly boxed you in. When people called you an earth angel, what they really meant was that you were easy to deal with. You didn't push back. You didn't embarrass them by calling out bad behavior. You absorbed discomfort so others wouldn't have to. That name rewarded your tolerance, not your strength. It praised how little trouble you caused, not how much power you held back. Over time, the label became an expectation. Earth angels are supposed to be endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, endlessly calm. Once people place that title on you, they feel entitled to your understanding. They expect you to excuse what they don't want to fix. They expect you to soften situations they created. And the moment you stop doing that, the tone changes. Suddenly you're different. Suddenly you're not as kind as before. Not because you became worse, but because you stopped being convenient. That's how the leash works. It's invisible, but it pulls every time you try to step out of line. The praise wasn't free, it came with conditions. Stay gentle even when disrespected. Stay calm even when boundaries are crossed. Stay loving even when you're drained. The name wasn't meant to honor you, it was meant to keep you predictable. The truth is, real kindness has teeth. It knows when to step back. It knows when to say enough. But people who benefit from your overgiving don't want real kindness. They want access without consequence. So they dress control up as admiration and call it spiritual. Once you see this clearly, you stop trying to live up to the title. You realize you were never meant to be a symbol for other people's comfort. You were a person with limits, instincts, and self-respect. Dropping the leash doesn't make you cold or cruel. It makes you honest. And honesty, to those who enjoyed your silence, feels like rebellion. Number 2. Your kindness scared people the moment it stopped being negotiable. Kindness is a strange power. When it's optional, it's celebrated. People love it when it serves their convenience, when it cushions their mistakes, when it smooths over their chaos. They call you compassionate, generous, angelic. They smile, they trust, they lean on you. But the moment your kindness stops being negotiable, the moment you decide it has limits, the room changes. Suddenly, your patience, once applauded, becomes threatening. Suddenly, your calm, once comforting, becomes unsettling. People are not used to boundaries from someone they've always relied on to bend. They don't like to be told, implicitly or explicitly, that your energy is yours to protect. They are used to your availability being a given, to your understanding being automatic, to your forgiveness being endless. When that expectation breaks, they panic. They feel unmasked, exposed, and unprepared. They were relying on your compliance, not your choice. That's why, when you finally draw the line, they accuse you of changing, as if choosing yourself is a betrayal. Your kindness wasn't weak, it was strategic. It was always powerful, but it was power disguised as softness. People loved the disguise because it served them. They were comfortable with a version of you that didn't challenge them, didn't demand reflection, didn't confront. But when you stop bending, stop excusing, stop performing for their comfort, the power in your presence becomes undeniable. It's sharp. It cuts. It forces them to face themselves. This is the moment people truly see you, not as a quiet, patient soul, but as someone fully awake, someone who has learned that generosity doesn't mean surrender. Your kindness is no longer currency. It's a boundary, and boundaries terrify those who were accustomed to using you without consequence. They fear it, they resist it, they misunderstand it. But in reality, your refusal to negotiate your worth is the purest form of power you've ever shown, and it's a power that no one can take from you. Number 3, angels go to war when boundaries are violated, not when praise disappears. People often misunderstand what it means to be strong or kind. They assume that angels, those calm, patient, and giving souls, are soft by nature, incapable of conflict. They think that praise or recognition is what motivates restraint, that silence or compliments keep you in check. The truth is far more powerful. Angels don't fight because someone stopped applauding them. They fight when limits are crossed, when respect is ignored, when their energy is used as a playground for other people's convenience. The war isn't dramatic or loud at first. It's precise, controlled, inevitable. It begins the moment someone believes they can take without consequence. For years you may have absorbed, excused, or overlooked offenses, not because you were weak, but because you were choosing your battles. Every insult, every manipulation, every demand on your patience was catalogued. Every overstep was noted, measured, and stored. Angels go to war not from impulse, but from the deep understanding that peace without protection is meaningless. The moment the balance tips too far, the fight is not about proving power. It's about restoring order. Your energy, your presence, your dignity, all of it demands respect. When people forget that, the war is unavoidable. And this war doesn't look like what people expect. It's not about shouting or seeking revenge. It's about clarity, precision, and uncompromising boundaries. It's about showing that you are no longer optional, no longer convenient, no longer a safety net for people who ignore responsibility. The energy you once gave freely becomes a measure of self-respect. The same people who called you calm, patient, or angelic suddenly feel the weight of your presence in its full intensity. They realize that restraint was never weakness. It was preparation. Being an angel doesn't mean being soft forever. It means knowing when the time comes to rise, to act, to enforce what should have been honored all along. When boundaries are violated, angels go to war, and by the time they do, the lessons are unforgettable. Number 4, They loved your healing until it required accountability. People admire the ability to heal. They love the calm presence, the soothing words, the patience that absorbs chaos without breaking. They celebrate your empathy, your understanding, your willingness to carry burdens that aren't yours. But the moment your healing requires accountability, admiration disappears. Suddenly, they don't want your insight. They don't want your guidance. They want comfort without consequence, care without reflection, solutions without self-awareness. Your generosity becomes inconvenient because it demands something they never signed up for, the truth. Healing isn't about covering up mistakes or smoothing over pain. Real healing forces reflection. It requires people to face their choices, own their actions, and sometimes change the parts of themselves they hoped you wouldn't notice. That's where many recoil. They were in love with the version of you that fixed without challenging, soothed without confronting, gave without expecting. They didn't realize that true empathy has standards, it has boundaries, it has consequences. Healing without accountability is just enablement, and enablement is rarely respected. This is why your value as a healer has always been misunderstood. People think your care is unconditional, when in reality it has rules: respect, honesty, effort, and responsibility. You can guide, nurture, and support, but you cannot fight battles that others refuse to fight themselves. And when they try to avoid the work, your patience stops being comfortable. It becomes a mirror they don't want to look into. The same hands that once clutched your support now feel exposed, and they push back. The power in your healing lies not in what you give, but in what you demand in return: integrity. The moment your kindness refuses to cover for their recklessness, they panic. They fear losing their safety net, and they blame you for their discomfort. But your strength is not in hiding your expectations. It's in refusing to sacrifice your principles for their ease. They loved your healing only until it became a force they could not control. And that is the moment your power became undeniable. Number 5. You weren't too intense. You were finally precise. People often label intensity as a flaw, as if feeling deeply, acting deliberately, or speaking with clarity is somehow excessive. For years, you were told to tone down your reactions, soften your presence, and make your power invisible so others wouldn't feel threatened. They wanted the version of you that could be easily managed, softly contained, and predictably agreeable. But what they called too intense wasn't chaos. It was precision finally taking over. Every word, every action, every boundary was deliberate. Nothing was wasted, nothing was accidental. Being precise is different from being loud or aggressive. It's the art of directing energy where it matters, of choosing battles that have meaning, and of refusing to waste time on distractions or shallow validation. People who thrived when you were vague, indecisive, or overly forgiving now flinch at your presence. They can sense the exactness of your mind, the sharpness of your awareness, the uncompromising clarity that was always there but hidden under the weight of trying to make everyone comfortable. They mistake it for intensity because it exposes them, and exposure is uncomfortable. Precision comes with control. It comes from observing patterns, understanding motives, and acting in a way that aligns with your truth rather than someone else's expectations. It's a quiet, undeniable force. When you finally act with precision, you stop being everyone's safe harbor. You stop being the person who absorbs blame, soothes tension, or excuses repeated offenses. You become intentional, accountable, and unstoppable in ways that make others nervous because it forces them to meet reality. The reality is that intensity was never the problem. You were never too much. The problem was that people around you weren't ready to handle someone who finally moved with purpose, thought with clarity, and refused to dilute their energy. Your precision is not aggression, it is authority. It is the moment they realize you were never playing their game. You were always building yours, quietly, deliberately, and with power they can't contain. Number 6. Your anger is not a fall from grace, it is a return to self. People often react to your anger as if it's a flaw, a sign that you've lost control or gone too far. They've been conditioned to see calmness as the ultimate virtue and conflict as a moral failure. But the truth is, your anger is not a deviation. It's a homecoming. It's the moment you stop apologizing for existing fully and start acknowledging the parts of yourself that were ignored, dismissed, or trampled for too long. Anger is not the opposite of grace. It's the signal that grace has been stretched beyond its limits. For too long you may have absorbed insults, tolerated disrespect, and softened your responses to keep the peace. That peace wasn't a reflection of weakness, it was a reflection of discipline, strategy, and restraint. But there comes a moment when continued self-sacrifice no longer serves your growth. That's when anger emerges, not as a blind outburst, but as a powerful reclamation. It's the energy that reminds you and everyone else that your boundaries are non-negotiable and your presence demands respect. Anger, when rooted in truth, has clarity. It's not about seeking revenge or breaking people. It's about recalibrating the space around you so it matches your worth. It reveals who respects your limits and who has been taking advantage of your patience. It exposes hypocrisy, dishonesty, and cowardice without you having to shout it to the world. It's precise, contained, and purposeful. The moment you embrace your anger, you stop pretending to be endlessly accommodating. You stop giving permission for others to exploit your silence. You reclaim the energy that was being drained by people too comfortable with your absence of confrontation. That's why your anger terrifies them. They have relied on your grace as a buffer, and now it's been replaced with undeniable self-respect. Anger is not failure. It's a compass pointing back to your truth. It's the signal that you are no longer bending to fit into someone else's comfort zone. It is the return of power to the only person who has always deserved it, you. Number 7. They mistook your restraint for weakness because they never saw your discipline. For years, people admired how calm you were, how composed you remained even when the world around you was chaotic. They saw your silence and your patience and assumed it meant you were fragile, powerless, or afraid to act. They labeled your restraint as weakness because it was easier for them to believe you were harmless than to recognize the truth. Every time you held back, you were exercising control, not suffering from incapacity. Discipline is invisible, but its absence is painfully obvious. Restraint is not doing nothing. It's choosing when and how to respond, carefully measuring the impact of every action, word, and decision. It's holding your energy tightly and releasing it only when it serves purpose, not ego. That level of control looks effortless from the outside, which is why most people misinterpret it. They mistake patience for passivity, silence for surrender, and tolerance for vulnerability. They never see the mental effort, the self-mastery, the internal calculations that go into keeping composure in the face of chaos. The moment your restraint stops being convenient for others, the illusion shatters. Suddenly, they feel threatened. They begin to notice the power that has always been there, carefully contained and measured, and it unnerves them. They realize that your calm wasn't emptiness, it was strength. Every word you didn't say, every reaction you suppressed, every compromise you avoided was a demonstration of discipline, not weakness. That discipline is your shield and your weapon. It allows you to navigate situations with precision, to act decisively when necessary, and to maintain integrity in a world that rewards impulse. People who relied on your supposed gentleness begin to grasp, too late, that restraint is not a lack of power, It's mastery of it. The same hands that once pushed against your patience now tremble at the realization that you were never theirs to manipulate. Your restraint was never a gift to them. It was a testament to your self-control, your awareness, and your unwavering commitment to your own path. Discipline is quiet, but when it reveals itself, it commands attention, and that revelation changes everything. Number 8. You learned that mercy without memory invites repeat offense. Mercy has always been your strength, the thing people admired about you. They saw your willingness to forgive, to give second chances, and to overlook mistakes, and they praised it as generosity. What they didn't see, and what most people never understand, is that true mercy is not about erasing the past. It's about acknowledging it, learning from it, and refusing to allow it to dictate your life repeatedly. Mercy without memory is like opening a door over and over for someone who has no intention of respecting the threshold. It invites the same mistakes, the same disrespect, the same hurt, because there's no consequence for crossing boundaries. You discovered this the hard way. The first few times, your forgiveness was pure, unconditional, even selfless. You gave people room to grow, to make amends, to show that they could do better. But growth requires accountability, and when accountability is absent, mercy becomes a trap. You began to notice the pattern, the same apologies, the same promises, the same behaviors that hurt you, repeated because they knew you would forgive. That's when clarity struck. Forgiveness without memory wasn't noble. It was enabling. It was leaving your door open while expecting people to act differently, knowing they probably wouldn't. From that point forward, you shifted. You started to remember, not in bitterness, not in grudges, but in wisdom. You remembered the patterns, the red flags, the lessons. You gave forgiveness differently, conscious, measured, protective. People could still have your mercy, but they couldn't abuse it without consequence. You realized that mercy was never about letting others off the hook. It was about giving yourself the power to move forward without carrying unnecessary weight, and ensuring that the same pain didn't circle back to you endlessly. This is where most people fail to understand you. They think mercy is weakness. They think remembering past offenses while still being kind is holding a grudge. But your mercy is strategic. It's fierce, disciplined, and protective. You forgive, but you do not forget. And in that balance, you reclaim your power, your peace, and your ability to move forward without letting the past repeat itself. Mercy without memory may look soft, but when combined with awareness, it becomes unstoppable. Number 9. You didn't become hard, you became exact. People notice the change in you and call it hard, cold, or distant, but that's a misunderstanding. You didn't lose softness, warmth, or empathy. You sharpened your presence. You became exact in what you allow, in what you give, and in how you respond. Every word, every action, every boundary is intentional. There's no excess, no filler, no wasted energy on people or situations that don't deserve it. What they see as hardness is really precision, a kind of clarity they weren't prepared for. For years, your energy was scattered. You gave freely, sometimes too freely, to people who didn't appreciate it. You explained yourself repeatedly, excused behavior that didn't deserve excuse, and softened your edges so others would feel comfortable. That generosity was beautiful, but it was also draining, and eventually you realized that giving without thought, reacting without purpose, and excusing without accountability didn't make you kind. It made you available for exploitation. That's when you started being exact. Being exact doesn't mean being cruel or unfeeling. It means choosing where your energy goes and who truly deserves it. It means acting deliberately rather than reactively. It means refusing to waste time on drama, manipulation, or people who refuse to meet you halfway. It's about alignment with your values and protection of your space, your peace, and your integrity. Those who thrived on your previous flexibility feel shocked because they were used to bending reality to fit their convenience. You no longer bend. You no longer negotiate your worth. Exactness is a kind of power people rarely recognize. It's quiet but undeniable. It commands respect not through fear or aggression, but through consistency, clarity, and intention. You aren't hard for standing your ground. You're exact, and that exactness is your armor, your compass, and your unspoken statement. You will no longer dilute yourself to make others comfortable. You are precise in a world that thrives on chaos, and that clarity is far more striking and far more intimidating than any anger or loud confrontation ever could be. Number 10. Your war is internal, and that's why it terrifies them. People assume conflict is loud and visible, full of shouting, arguments, and obvious confrontations. They think the battles worth noticing are the ones everyone can see. But your real war has always been internal. It's the struggle to maintain your integrity, to protect your energy, to navigate a world full of manipulation and entitlement without losing yourself. You fought endless battles in silence, weighing every decision, observing every move, and calculating when to act, when to hold back, and when to let go. That kind of war isn't visible, but it's infinitely more dangerous because it doesn't require their awareness to be effective. The internal war is subtle but powerful. Every time someone tried to cross a line, you analyzed, measured, and responded with thought, not impulse. Every time someone tested your patience, you weighed the cost of engagement versus the cost of silence. You've been strategizing, anticipating, and preparing, all while keeping an exterior calm that made them feel safe, in control, and unconcerned. That calm was never weakness. It was the mask of a mind at war, quietly mapping the truth of every interaction. When people sense the results of this internal discipline, they get scared. They don't know where your boundaries will land, or when your patience will finally run out. They don't see the countless hours spent in self-control, reflection, and calculation, which makes every action you take now sharp, precise, and intentional. They are unnerved because they've been used to predictability, and your internal war has removed that predictability entirely. Your real power has never been in aggression or confrontation. It's in preparation, awareness, and self-mastery. It's terrifying to those who relied on exploiting your patience because they suddenly realize that every word, every boundary, every reaction is no longer theirs to manipulate. You have fought a war internally that most people would collapse under, and the victory lies in your presence, your clarity, and your refusal to compromise your truth. That is why your silence speaks louder than words ever could, and why it unsettles anyone who thought they understood you. Number 11. They wanted you holy, not sovereign. For a long time, people admired your goodness. They praised your patience, your forgiveness, your empathy, your willingness to give more than they could ever imagine. They called you an angel, a healer, someone rare and pure. What they didn't understand, and what they never wanted to understand, was that their admiration came with a hidden expectation. They wanted your holiness to be a service, a performance that made them feel safe, comfortable, and unchallenged. They wanted the image of your goodness without ever considering the person behind it. Sovereignty, on the other hand, has nothing to do with pleasing others. Sovereignty is self-rule. It's the refusal to let anyone dictate your energy, your choices, or your peace. It's the recognition that your life, your boundaries, and your voice belong to you alone. When you began to claim your sovereignty, people grew uneasy. The same ones who applauded your calm and praised your patience suddenly labeled you difficult, cold, or different. They weren't ready to meet a person who demanded respect on their own terms, rather than on the terms of everyone else's comfort. They mistook your compliance for humility and your silence for agreement. They expected you to be endlessly giving, endlessly forgiving, endlessly pliable. When you started living as your own authority, your own standard of integrity, they felt threatened. Your sovereignty is not rebellion for the sake of it. It is simply alignment with your truth. It exposes their entitlement and forces them to face a reality they never prepared for, that you exist first for yourself, not for them. Being sovereign is not a fall from grace. It is the natural evolution of someone who has lived too long under expectation and misuse. Holiness without sovereignty is shallow. True power comes from owning your space, your choices, and your energy unapologetically. When you stop performing for approval and start ruling your life, people see it as defiance, but in reality, it's your freedom. And nothing is more magnetic, intimidating, and undeniable than that. Number 12. You don't seek revenge, you withdraw oxygen. Revenge is messy, it's noisy, impulsive, and often leaves you tangled in the very chaos you wanted to escape. That's why you learned a different, far more effective method: withdrawal. You don't need to shout, attack, or retaliate. You simply stop giving what they thrived on: your attention, your energy, your presence. These are the resources people take for granted. When you quietly remove them, the effect is immediate and undeniable. It's not a display. It's a recalibration. They suddenly realize how much they depended on you, and the absence speaks louder than anything you could say. Withdrawing isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's the awareness that your involvement, your compassion, your care was always a choice, and when that choice is withheld, it becomes a lesson in accountability. People who thrived on your constant availability, who assumed your forgiveness and patience were limitless, suddenly feel the consequences of their disregard. They flounder because they were accustomed to having unlimited access to your energy, and now, without it, they are exposed. The realization hits harder than confrontation ever could because it's silent, controlled, and undeniable. There's a quiet power in removing yourself from their orbit. You no longer fuel their drama or compensate for their laziness. You no longer offer comfort as a crutch for their irresponsibility. You create space where your energy belongs to you first, and in doing so, you force them to face themselves, or fade into irrelevance. It's a reminder that your presence was never guaranteed, and that respect cannot exist without awareness. Withdrawing oxygen is subtle, clean, and irreversible. It doesn't rely on anger, confrontation, or spectacle. It relies on clarity and self-respect. It teaches lessons without words, forces reflection without threats, and protects your energy while reshaping the environment around you. The people who underestimated you, who assumed your patience and kindness were weaknesses, quickly learn that absence is far more powerful than presence when wielded with intent. Your power isn't loud, it's essential, and its quiet withdrawal can shift everything. Number 13. Your presence now forces people to meet themselves. People rarely think about the power of presence. They assume that being quiet, composed, and steady is passive, easy, even invisible. But your presence carries weight. Weight born from experience, boundaries, and self-awareness. You've lived, you've learned, and you've grown. And now, when you enter a room or engage with someone, you bring all of that with you. People who once took your energy for granted suddenly feel it pressing against their illusions, their excuses, and their half-truths. Your presence is not performance, it is a mirror. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't bend to comfort anyone. It simply exists fully and forces others to confront the reality they usually avoid. They may feel uncomfortable, irritated, or even defensive. That's because your presence exposes their inconsistencies. It reminds them of promises they never kept, boundaries they never respected, and the energy they squandered while relying on yours. The calm, the clarity, the focus you now carry is unfamiliar to them because it doesn't serve their narrative. It doesn't apologize for their mistakes. It doesn't excuse repeated offenses. It simply is, precise, unwavering, and honest. This is why people often misread you as cold or intimidating. They are not reacting to you. They are reacting to themselves, to the parts they cannot face. Your presence has no interest in approval or admiration. It has no need to justify itself. It only holds space for truth, reflection, and accountability. Those who are ready rise to meet it. Those who are not shrink, stumble, or retreat. The power of presence is silent but undeniable. It doesn't demand action, it demands recognition. People are forced to measure themselves against someone who no longer compromises their standards, someone who refuses to dilute their energy for convenience, someone who has aligned completely with their own truth. And that confrontation, whether they admit it or not, changes the dynamics forever. Your presence is not a gift. They cannot borrow it lightly anymore. It is a force that commands honesty, clarity, and respect, and that alone makes it irresistible and terrifying to those unprepared to meet themselves. Number 14. You were never meant to stay an angel in their story, only in your own. For a long time, people framed your life as if it existed for their comfort, their admiration, their approval. They called you an angel and praised your patience, your kindness, your willingness to forgive. They celebrated the parts of you that were convenient, safe, and easy to admire, while quietly ignoring the depth, the complexity, and the power that lived beneath the surface. They wanted a version of you that existed for their story, their convenience, and their ego. But you were never meant to live there. You were never meant to fit into someone else's script. Being an angel in their story came with invisible rules. You were expected to absorb without retaliating, forgive without holding memory, bend without breaking, and always remain available. Every act of generosity was scrutinized for compliance, every display of patience measured against their expectations. They saw your grace, but they didn't see the effort, the boundaries, or the wisdom that came with it. They wanted your light, but only as long as it illuminated their world, never your own. The moment you started living in your own story, everything shifted. You stopped performing for applause, stopped bending for approval, stopped excusing behavior that violated your limits. You embraced your truth, claimed your boundaries, and aligned with the person you were meant to be, not the version they wanted. This is when people label you different, cold, or distant. They misunderstand because their version of reality depended on you staying in their story, pliable and predictable. Living in your own story isn't rebellion, it's sovereignty. It's refusing to shrink for anyone's comfort, refusing to perform kindness for validation, refusing to compromise your energy for the narrative of others. You are still compassionate, still aware, still powerful, but now that power exists on your terms. You are an angel in your own story, fierce and aligned, and nothing they expect or imagine can contain you. Finally, your life is yours, and that is the most formidable, undeniable truth of all. Conclusion. Every word, every boundary, every silent moment of restraint tells a story of power disguised as patience. You were called an angel, praised for your kindness, celebrated for your calm, but those labels never defined you. They were a reflection of how others wanted to use you, not who you truly are. Behind every forgiving smile, every quiet presence, and every act of mercy lies a force that cannot be contained. You didn't become harsh, distant, or unkind. You became precise, sovereign, and aligned. You learned that real power isn't loud, it doesn't demand applause. It quietly shifts dynamics, protects your energy, and forces people to meet themselves. Your anger, your clarity, your exactness, and even your silence are all part of the armor you forged. You are no longer living in the story others wrote for you. You are in your own, and every decision you make honors your truth. The same patience that once made you a target now becomes your weapon of discernment. The mercy that once invited exploitation now is guided by memory, wisdom, and boundaries. You don't seek revenge. You simply remove your energy, and the lesson speaks for itself. Every presence, every boundary, every refusal to compromise signals one undeniable truth. You exist first for yourself, and that is the ultimate power. This isn't just growth, it's evolution. It's the shift from being admired to being respected, from being convenient to being essential, from being a silent observer to a conscious force in your own life. You've returned to yourself, fully, unapologetically, and with a force that can no longer be overlooked or misused. If this resonated with you, make sure to join the movement. Subscribe to the channel for more truths that challenge, inspire, and awaken your inner power. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your energy matters, and so does theirs. Let's make every moment count. Stay awakened, chosen ones.